This video is How to Approximate Square Roots to the Nearest Hundredth Place by Yves Wisnus. This video is intended for my students and is not meant to be a professional publication. Thank you. First off, you should know your perfect squares all the way up to 16 squared. If you don't, feel free to pause the video and copy this down. We'll need to know those in order to be able to solve these problems. Next, you're going to need to find the square root of a number that is less than 256. If you want, you can do this for numbers that are greater than 256, but you will need to know the perfect squares leading up to that. So let's say we want to know the square root of 107. It's between the square root of 121 and the square root of 100. Since 100 and 121 are two consecutive perfect squares, and 107 is between those two numbers. And the square root of 100 is 10, and the square root of 121 is 11. We know that the square root of 107 is someplace between 10 and 11. In other words, it is 10 and some fraction. Now, 100 to 121 is 21 steps apart. We can find this by taking the 121 and subtracting 100. Those are 21 steps apart. 107 is 7 of those steps forward towards 121, starting at 100. We can find that by taking 107 minus 100, but it's pretty simple to see that 7 is 107 is 7/21 of the way between 100 and 121. So we know that square root of 107 is going to be approximately 10 and 7/21. It will not be exactly that. However, we don't want a fraction, we want a decimal approximation. So we're going to take that 7/21 and get the decimal approximation of that. Well, to get the decimal approximation, we want to turn it into a fraction that is over 100. So we ask ourselves, what can we multiply 21 by to get as close to 100 as possible? Well, if we multiply it, we can get 84, which is multiplied by 4. 21 times 4 is 84. Or we can get 105, which is taking 21 and multiplying it by 5. Since 105 is the closer number to 100, we're going to choose the times 5. So then we take 7 and we multiply it by 5, and 7 times 5 is 35. So 7 over 21 is approximately 35 over 100. So that means that 7 over 21 is approximately 0.35. So the square root of 107 is approximately 10.35. However, 105 is a little too high, so we need to bring it down just a little bit and make it maybe 10.34. If you prefer, you could say 10.33, but 105 is really not that far from 100, so we're going to stay with 10.34. Let's look at another example. This time we have the square root of 90. Well, square root of 90 is between what two perfect squares? Well, square root of 90 is less than the square root of 100, and it's greater than the square root of 81. That means that the square root of 90 is between 9 and 10. So square root of 90 is going to be 9 and 9/19 of the way, because 9 is how many steps it takes to get from 81 to 90, and 19 is how far apart 81 and 100 are. So the square root of 90 is approximately 9 and 9/19. However, again, we still want a decimal approximation. So 9/19, we're going to see how to get that to be approximately 100. And we find that if we multiply it by 5, we get 95. And if we multiply it by 6, we get 114. The one that's closer is the times 5, or 95. And so we're going to take 9, the numerator, and multiply it by 5 and get 45. So the square root of 90 is approximately 9.45. But better would be 9.47, because 95 is not quite all the way up to 100. And so we bump it up by 1 or 2 hundredths, because again, 95 is pretty close to 100. So we get an approximation of 9.47. Let's look at one more example. How about the square root of 175? Well, that gets us into higher numbers, but hopefully you have those written down. So that's between the square root of 169, which is 13 squared, and 196, which is 14 squared. Again, you should have these perfect squares memorized all the way up to the perfect square of 256, which is 16 squared. So that means that square root of 175 is between 13 and 14, and 175 is 6 away from 169, so it's going to be 13 and 6, and then 196 is 27 away from 169. So the square root of 175 is approximately 13 and 6/27. So 6/27, we try to get that over 100. If we multiply it by 3, that's the 27 times 3, we get 81. And if we multiply it times 4, we get 108. This time 108 is the highest, is the closest number. So we do 6 times 4, which is 24. But that's a little bit too much. So we're going to need to round down a little bit. And 108 is not super close to 100, but it's not super far. So we'll probably round down by about 2, and we get 13.22, which is approximately the square root of 175. Please review this video if you have any questions. Thank you.